Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum, brothers and sisters, and welcome to Albayan Live. I am Abu Rahman. We are live from Albayan Radio Studios on this Thursday evening, the 2nd of April 2020, and I'm joined by my dear beloved brother, Sheikh Nazir Maskala. Did I pronounce your second name right?
Yeah,
Assalamu alaikum.
Allah barik feek. Alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
How's it pronounced in Arabic?
Masqali.
Masqali.
There you are. The one that sharpens the swords, apparently.
That's a nice meaning.
There you are.
Nice meaning. And how have you been?
Wallah, alhamdulillah, bi khair, alhamdulillah, especially during these times. Alhamdulillah, I've been keeping well. Alhamdulillah.
Barakallah fiqh. For those of you who don't know, Ustaz or Sheikh Nazir is not only a Hafidh Quran and a student of knowledge, he's also a physiotherapist.
That's correct. I do have my own practice, and I've been practicing physiotherapy for over 10 years, maybe I think 13 or 14 years now. Alhamdulillah, and I run a rehabilitation clinic in Campbelltown at the moment.
Alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah. I know we don't want to talk too much about COVID-19 because people are hearing a lot of it and watching news about it.
I think we're over it.
Yep. How's it affected your work?
Well, it's affected. We're considered essential services. We are to remain open unless obviously business drops off. Business has dropped off significantly, especially in our area. But alhamdulillah, we still have some patients attending on a daily basis or whenever is required. Our practice is more rehabilitation, so patients come post-op for rehabilitation or under the NDIS that require ongoing therapy, and if they can't attend the practice, then we attend their home and conduct home visits. Alhamdulillah. So we've been affected, but we're still going, inshallah. I can't see us closing down anytime soon, but that could be a possibility in the future. Alhamdulillah.
We are live on Albayan Radio, as we said, on our Wi-Fi devices and our apps, and we're also live on Facebook Live. So whoever would like to leave a comment or a question for our dear brother Nazir, you can do so on our post there on our live feed there. Leave your comments and questions right there, and inshallah we'll try to answer them throughout the program. I will be looking at this laptop in front of me, trying to see your comments and feedback and questions. Now our topic today is keeping active at home, since a lot of us, due to the restrictions, have to stay home most of the time, especially the mothers and the kids. Keeping active at home. Why this topic?
Well, it's a situation I don't think anyone's ever experienced before. Obviously, the children are now being homeschooled, so we know we get lazy during the holidays and the kids just sit in front of a TV or the game consoles all day. Now it's actually school week, and they're at home. The mothers are at home. The fathers are at home because they can't go to work, some of them, obviously. And obviously some mothers that do go to work. So the majority of the family is at home, especially like today as well. It was raining. Yesterday was raining. This is a situation I don't think we've ever experienced before, and it's going to be like this for the next few weeks, next few months. Apparently they're saying, Wallahu alam. The gyms are closed. The parks are closed. Everything is closed. Almost, there's no point of going to the shopping center. Usually people, when they're bored, they actually go to the shops and they just walk around.
They're still going.
They're still going.
Yes, they are.
But slowly, the shops are starting to close, and to the point where you're just going to be restricted to your homes, pretty much. So I thought maybe this topic might be of benefit to the Muslims in how to keep active. Not talking about keeping fit. We will go through something of a program to sort of get you active, but just keeping active, keeping moving at home. I thought this was a topic that needs to be addressed.
Okay, before we go into it, how have you found it, you and your family, with the homeschooling the last 2 weeks?
Well, last week we took my kids to school every day.
I took off early on, then I left them at home.
Yeah, we stopped on Friday because we just felt uncomfortable taking the kids to school when there was only like 3-4 children at school. So alhamdulillah, we gave in, and we commenced homeschooling, or remote schooling as they called it. I went to Officeworks on Monday to stock up on some IT things, equipment, whatever, to allow for my kids to be homeschooled, and I walked in, and to my shock, it was just empty. I've never seen an Officeworks empty. I couldn't get a screen. I couldn't get a computer. There was nothing there. Literally, it was empty. And I'm thinking, wow, the frenzy is even affected Officeworks. And I guess people are have started to work from home, and that's why they probably need all those types of
You know what the
equipment.
trick is, before we get back on topic, is search online first and see where the items you are after are available and go there. Call them first.
That's
Is
a
this
good idea.
available? That's available. I've done that with the printer, and subhanAllah, I got the last one.
Wallah, ya akhi, I never thought Officeworks would be empty.
No,
I just didn't even click to me. I just drove down the road. I walked in. I'm like, whoa, what the?
There's 8 million people
Yeah.
in New South
Small
Wales.
city,
So
yeah.
how many children there would be at home now, and everyone's doing basically the same thing, trying
That's
to stock
true,
up
yeah.
on stuff to educate their children.
That's true.
Since we're talking about children, let's start with the children. Children are at home. They're meant to be doing their schoolwork at home.
No.
They're going to be on computers a lot
No.
because of the online learning.
Mm.
And they're going to be most likely more on the TV.
Mhm.
What's a practical way of keeping them active? If not, we can't keep them ideally to the highest level of fitness, but to keep them at least active where they don't harm themselves.
Well, alhamdulillah, the school that my kids go to, they have they've been given a timetable. Roughly, let's say from 9 to 11 is work, and then have an hour break. And then from 12 to 2 is work, and then have an hour break, or something similar to that. I'm not sure of the schedule exactly. But the way we've dealt with this in my home is we've been trying to give the kids a lot of active breaks, whereby we would take them out, obviously within the home, either in the backyard and the front yard, and would get them to do something that they enjoy, something that increases their heart rate, gets them active. So, for example, like this morning, we got them riding their bikes.
Excellent.
And we live in a cul-de-sac, so they were riding around and around and around. That was the first thing in the morning before they even started. Now, we know when we drop off our kids to school, they at least get half an hour of activity in the morning, or even 15 minutes where they run around. I'm not sure. You probably would know when you walk into the primary school and all you see is kids running around,
right,
knocking into you, knocking into other kids.
Hour, yeah.
That's it. So we thought we'd try and simulate that at home. And we did. So this morning it was bike riding. Yesterday it was out in the backyard playing on the swings or whatever we had. Other days we actually have a Wii. We don't have any other game consoles besides a Wii. And I did get the Wii because it's got the Wii Sports. So
yeah, it's pretty good.
subhanAllah, my kids, half an hour of that, and they're sweating. They're breaking up into a sweat, and they're really active, which is good. So we generally would start our day with some kind of activity for the kids, obviously after breakfast. And then they would go back in and wash themselves and sort of cool down. And then they would perform their first 2-hour block of work that we have prepared for them the day before, or the school has prepared for them for the week. And then come lunchtime, we feed them. And then, again, we get them out to do something they would like. So it doesn't necessarily have to be an activity whereby they're running or they're skipping or they're in the backyard. So yesterday we got them doing like artwork. So out in the backyard, just moving around, getting active, as well as getting their brains working at the same time. And then they were back in to do their second block of work. Yani, you've got to organize the day. It can't be folder. It can't just be, let's just do whatever we can and then have a break. And then whenever you're ready, let's do whatever we can and then have a break.
We mentioned with our dear brother Jamal, when he came on Albayan Live, and he spoke about maximizing online learning, and he said something to you, something that you said as well. Organize your day the night before.
Yeah, it has to be organized the night before, and you have to inform your children of what you're going to organize for them for the next day. You have to tell them, okay, now tomorrow morning we're going to wake up, we'll have some breakfast, then we'll go some bike riding. So they'd be excited about that, and then we'll do your English work and your maths work in the morning, or your Arabic and Islamic work in the morning. Then we'll have some lunch. Then you can do some art or craft or Lego or play the Wii or whatever it may be. And then we're going to do the other block of work. As they know, we've got our schedule up on the wall.
Yes.
It's there for them to read. They know, they follow the times, and then we sort of allow them to follow that schedule, and understand that schedule, so they know what they're expecting the next day.
And I think the schools, I've seen it with Malik Fahad, they've sent an actual program and an outline for you to follow generally, which is pretty good.
So that's the schedule I'm talking about. So my children do go to Malik Fahad. So alhamdulillah, they've given us a schedule for at least us to follow, and we do follow it. We tweak it a little bit here and there depending on our children. But it's really important to have that schedule. to maintain that schedule, because they've been used to it for 5 days a week, for the last 9 weeks. So it's important to maintain that schedule and let them know that we are going to follow that schedule. And obviously, if you follow the schedule, we can reward you with playtime and however you reward your children.
Now, a golden question, or a very important question, especially for someone in your field: sitting postures when they're on the computers or the tablets.
I'm sitting up straight now.
Yes, same here. I've been thinking about it. And actually, we dropped your name the other day on the Albayan Live, Maximising Online Learning with Jamal. And he said he's going to check with you regarding some of the postures he mentioned.
He did, yeah.
So our children, whether they're on the computer
or
whether they're on their tablets, how should they be sitting? And for how long should they be in that sitting position?
SubhanAllah, the age of technology has probably been the worst thing for the human race. SubhanAllah, we've been made of bones and joints, so many joints in our body to be able to move, and yet we choose to just sit down all day and obviously use the technology. But alhamdulillah, times are changing. Over the last 5-10 years, we've been noticing people have started to adjust their work desks. We've seen, for example, in the Commonwealth Bank, we've seen hot desks. So when you go to work, you can only sit in a certain in a different desk. There's no fixed table.
Oh, excellent.
And we're seeing other environments, work environments, adopt that same principle. Standing up desks, sitting down desks. But essentially, the problem with working on computers is that you are fixed to one posture, and that's the problem. You can't stand up straight and work in that straight, perfect position, for too long, and you can't do that in sitting either. So what we do recommend is taking an active break, and I mean like an active break in the sense of getting up and walking, let's say, to the bathroom, washing your hands and walking back.
Every 20 to 30 minutes,
I'd say every 5 to 10 minutes.
5 to 10 minutes?
Yeah, absolutely, every 5 to 10 minutes. Previously, I've researched that having an active break every 5 minutes of about 30 seconds actually increases productivity and performance of that person, of that individual. Whereas sitting down will reduce your productivity and performance, as well as seek to give you some kind of injury of your lower back or your neck or RSI and whatnot.
What is RSI? Sorry.
So repetitive strain injury. So it's when you're just constantly doing one thing and your body part is exposed to one type of action repetitively for hours on end, and the body it can't tolerate that. So you start to destroy that structure over time, like a tendon or a joint or whatever it may be. So if you're taking a break every 5 to 10 minutes, getting up, just walking around your desk, doesn't really have to be, I'm going to do 10 star jumps, because that's probably not the most healthiest. You're going from being inactive to completely active with a high impact type activity. You got to warm up, yeah. So just pretty much just walking down your hallway or coming back is sufficient enough just to get your blood flowing out of your calves. And just your joints mobile again, and your ligaments being stretched out.
Do you remember at school when our teachers used to make us get up and jump up and down for about a minute?
No, maybe I was earlier before you. We used to get up and jump around anyway. Yeah, and they used to try and settle us down.
They used to like, if everyone's sitting down for, let's say, an hour or two, they'd get everyone up. All right.
That's right. They
jump up and move your arms around.
Yeah,
and
it's important.
Star jumps. And
it's important.
You're reminding me of that, subhanAllah, anyway.
Maintaining one posture for too long, especially with the spine, you're really risking developing poor postures in the spine. And we see it nowadays. We see, people have got a dowager's hump, that little hump that sits at the base of the neck. And that's an indicator of poor posture that has been developed. And actually, it's quite difficult to get rid of that once you're past your teens. The body stiffens up. Your disc joints actually start to, what we call desiccate. They start to dry up, especially in women first, in their early to mid-20s, and then it starts to get worse as they get into their 30s. For men, it's more in their 30s, early 30s, that their discs start to sort of become ligamentous and dry up, and so they lose their flexibility in their spine. So if they've been sitting in that poor posture, for years on end, they'll actually will be fixed to that posture, and it'll be quite difficult to improve on that posture, and then that'll end up leading to other joint and disc diseases in the future.
We got our first comments here. It's a question by brother Jim or Jamal. Assalamu alaikum. Can Brother Nazir give us tips on using lap desks when nothing else can be used in terms of posture? You know, those things you put in the lap. Is that what he means?
So the issue with the lap desk is that you're still looking down. The laptop is sitting on your lap. Obviously, the lap desk raises it a little bit, but it's still forcing you to look down. Now, ergonomically, you need to be looking directly at your monitor within a give and take minus 15 degrees of the horizontal. So if the lap desk is too low and you are looking down, it will cause your thoracic spine, which is your middle of your spine, and your neck to sort of adopt a bad posture. And doing that for too long will lead to other degenerative changes.
So something like this laptop here, when I'm looking down, is no good.
Heather, yes, it's no good. So
what about something like this
usually you get a raise. So on my computer workstation at home, I've got a raise. So my computer screen.
Eye level. How would
generally
like this one here,
generally eye level. That's perfect. So eye level within 15 degrees of the minus of the horizontal. So you've got that little bit of leeway. You can look down a little bit, but generally it should remain at high level. You should have a supportive chair, a chair that supports your lower back as well as your middle back, as well as your head and your neck.
So the back should be straight?
Yeah, generally you should be leaning back into the chair. Now, if you've been sitting down, you've had a sit-down job for so long, let's say 10 years, and you've developed this fixed posture, it's going to be quite difficult to sit back. You might irritate your neck, you might irritate your upper back. But generally, if you see a physiotherapist, they can assist you with flexibility type exercises to improve on that. But generally, you should be sitting back. Your lower back should be supported. Your thoracic spine, which is your middle back, that should be supported, and your head should be supported, just like in a car, right? The car chair, I got to say, obviously, if you're driving a premium car, it comes with lumbar support, it comes with a side bolster, it comes with head support, and you can adjust the headrest so that when you're sitting down, you're quite comfortable. You can drive for long distances without having to wanting to change your posture every so often. And you sitting down in your seat for 8 hours, you need a comfortable chair, just as comfortable as what your car seat could provide you. That's if you obviously, if you're driving a low-end car, then it's quite, some of the chairs aren't as supportive. But, if you've got a premium car, then, you've got your lumbar support, you've got your headrest that can adjust up and down, forward and back. And so your chair should be similar to that. You should have your lumbar support, you should support your middle spine, and you should support your neck. So generally, if you're sitting away from the back support, then your axial skeleton, which is your spine, is taking all the load of your weight, so from your head down to your pelvis. But when you're leaning back into the chair, then some of the weight is being taken through the chair, and then there's less stress on your actual on your body, your joints.
What about the use of tablets today? What's the best way for the child to use the tablet? Many a times they're sitting in weird, different postures when they're using them. Everyone's different.
That's
true.
My
kids anyway.
That's true.
What's the best way in terms of?
So generally, I tell my kids, if you're going to use a tablet, maybe be lying down. In a lying down position, so that their spine is straightened and offloaded in terms of the weight, and then they can sort of apply it to, pop it on a pillow and then use it that way. Or if they're sitting on the couch, then put up a few pillows and then have it high, so it's resting on, let's say, 3 pillows, so it's almost at eye level. Or you can, we've got at home a bench, and the chairs are pretty low, so it's perfect for the kids. So the tablet's sitting up on that, it's sort of almost at eye level. And then I'm just prompting the kids. My kids, I'm always prompting them about correcting their posture, and I've shown them how to correct their posture. So as soon as I say posture, everyone sort of sits up again. And it's really just it's mind over matter, to be honest with you. Like, you've got to keep reminding yourself, even as an adult and as a health professional myself, and me telling patients all day that you have to sit up straight, you have to correct your posture, and blah blah blah. Even I myself forget. 10 minutes in to some reading, I sort of fall down, and then I've got to sort of remind myself. So it's having some kind of reminder on your computer screen, a timer. I'm sure there's an app that times you every 5-10 minutes to get up, or I think there's a program Back in the days, I used to recommend it. I can't remember what it was called, but it used to shut your screen down, or used to go to a screensaver and tell you to get up and go for an active break. So that's generally the recommendations that we provide to people that are required to sit down all day on a computer desk.
That's for kids. Let's move on to the other people of the house, the most important people of the house, not the fathers or the men, the mothers.
The mothers.
How can they keep active in this time? They can't go out or go to the park, or if some of them used to go to the gym, they have to do it at home now.
Yeah.
What would you advise them to do?
Well, subhanAllah, I've always recommended that for the sisters, they have some kind of gym equipment at home, be it a treadmill, a cross trainer. I really like the cross trainers, or an exercise bike, something that they can sort of just easily jump on, perform 20, 30 minutes of activity, and then hop off. And they can do that once, they can do that twice a day. SubhanAllah, our women are always left behind. They're always at home in the kitchen, and I'd recommend them to try
now.
Classroom.
It's the classroom now.
It's still the kitchen in my house. La, alhamdulillah, it's both. But I would really try and recommend the women to avoid, trying to be a master chef in the kitchen now that the kids are home, and you can show off your skills of baking and cooking and whatnot.
Keep it simple, yeah.
Keep it simple. Wallahi, we don't really need much energy to survive throughout the day. SubhanAllah, the Prophet ﷺ used to live on dates. They used to get up in the morning. Abu Bakr used to be walking around, and he would ask the Prophet, the Prophet would ask him, what were you doing? I'm looking for breakfast, I'm looking for food. And they would say, Umar, I'm looking for, the same thing. And if they didn't find food by the time Dhuhr came, they would continue to fast up until Maghrib. So subhanAllah, it's, we really, honestly, especially in these times where we're locked down in our homes, if you look at how much activity we are performing to the amount of energy we are intaking, it's really disproportionate. Like we're having too much food, we're moving very little, and it's causing weight gain and other health issues. So I do recommend for the sisters, and if they could try and maybe get their hands on some kind of exercise equipment. If they don't have exercise equipment, I always recommend like even walking up and down the street. If your kids are able to to be looked after. To be looked after at home, like if they're in their teenage ages, walking up and down the street for 20, 30 minutes is probably a recommendation that I would give to the women. Going up and down stairs. I'll towards the end of the show, I'll speak about maybe an exercise program that they can utilize at home. But generally, if you don't have any exercise equipment, basic things like walking or running or jogging, going up and down steps, and other things that I will mention towards the end. Exercise bands nowadays, people are utilizing exercise bands. I've been getting calls, can you bring me some exercise bands home? I need to use it because the gym's closed and whatnot.
Are they similar to the resistance bands?
Yeah, the same thing. Resistance bands. Dumbbells, if you don't have any dumbbells, you can always, 1 liter of water is 1 kilo. You can pop that in a shopping bag and utilize that.
3 liter milk.
3 liters. So there's always many things that you can utilize at home.
5 kilo bag of rice if you like.
Wallah, anything. You have to improvise. You have to improvise, but come on, you have to always be safe.
Yes.
So recently, over the last week, I've been seeing some injuries come through at the practice because patients are over improvising, performing activities that they shouldn't be, and injuring themselves at the same time.
Can I just ask you a question, if you don't mind? What's the weirdest reason for an injury that you've ever heard? If you don't mind.
Yeah.
The weirdest.
Well, there's
top 5.
There's been there's been so many. I work in Campbelltown, so there's
yes. Shout out to
off the top of my head. Off the top of my head, I can't think of anything at the moment. But there has been a lot of funny ones. But you got to control yourself in front of the patient. You can't sort of start laughing at the patient.
Some of them laugh. I've heard people relate some of the stuff that's happened to them, and they tell it laughing. I was doing this and this happened, and
maybe maybe the injuries that I get mostly probably not ones that I should be mentioning.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Lower back injuries still popular?
Very popular. The lower back, subhanAllah.
Better way to put it.
it's so common. People are so uneducated on how their lower back works. Had they just maybe looked online for a video that shows how the lower back works and how to look after it, subhanAllah, it will prevent them from so many injuries. And I wish we'd learned that at school.
Bend your knees, not your back still.
Bend your knees, yeah. Bend at your hips and not your back. Avoid twisting, especially. Twisting is probably the most common cause. Bending and twisting and lifting is probably the most common cause of a disc bulge or a disc tear or, those kind of injuries that will remain with you forever, to be honest with you. Yeah, if it's severe enough.
Truth or myth? The Lebanese bad back, is there such a thing?
MashaAllah, us Lebs, we're hard workers, Yassi. We're either, what's the saying? We're either, we're zero or hero. We're either sitting at home doing absolutely nothing or we're giving it 100%.
Growing up, everyone had a bad back for some reason. What was going on? Like,
was
it for other reasons we don't want to mention on air? But
the older generation, mashallah alayhim, I think they took too much honey and they worked too hard. Yeah, I think they worked too hard. So, coming to Australia as not refugees, some of them refugees, but some of them just going from a war-torn country where there was not much work, coming to Australia where the work was just abundant. And they just took every second of it to allow us the lives that we live now, alhamdulillah. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward them for their struggles that they've gone through to keep us safe and keep us provided for.
Before we continue speaking about some keeping active advice for the sisters at home, we are live on Facebook as well. You can leave your comments there on our feed there. And inshallah, Staz Nazir will try to answer your query or your questions or any feedback or advice you have for keeping active at home. Let us know on our Facebook page, which you can see live now on our feed. To the sisters.
Back to the sisters, yeah. So, whether it's sisters or the parents in general, you guys will act as role models for the children. If you see that your children are gaining weight, then just look back at yourself. Look back at your lifestyle. Look back at how you've instilled being active, a healthy lifestyle in your children, and start to correct that from now. If your children are starting to gain weight, it's because you're not stressing the point of being active. It's you're their role model. If you're active, if you've got an exercise regime that you perform every day in front of the children would want to accept that as a way of life. So my children know that in the morning I attend the gym and I come back at 7 o'clock in the morning, let's say, for example, and then I go in, I wake them up for school, they get ready, or they're already awake and they see me come back dressed, sweaty and in my gym clothes. My wife, Allahumma barik, she has an exercise program every day.
Excellent.
So, when the kids are in their lunch break, then she lets them know that this is my 1 hour of exercising. You can't interrupt. I need to exercise. If you need something, unless it's important, you need to wait. And she'll do her 1 hour of exercise. If we've had heavy meals, we would all later on go back and be active to try and burn whatever meal that we've had that was sort of in excess. Maybe it was like some kind of heavy Lebanese meal or something like that. But we would always instill that in our kids. If you eat something heavy, you need to be active afterwards to try and burn that off. Especially instill in the children and in your family as a whole. Let's say in the evenings, avoiding late night meals,
the kebabs or the pizza.
Yeah, well, they were the nice days, but at the same time, they were the days that caused us to gain our guts that we have, our single ab that we have.
Single ab, huh?
But my wife, she instills in the children. The kids, I come home late from work. And then the kids, all I hear them is, I'm hungry, and I know they've just eaten. I know they've just had dinner, right? But I'm hungry because they're always hungry. So when a child says that they're hungry, they don't always mean that they're starving and they're dying and they haven't eaten all day. A glass of water, a cup of milk, a fruit, a single piece of fruit, subhanAllah, it's so sufficient just to curb that hunger. So we have we've commenced over the last maybe 2 months. Once that adhan for Maghrib hits, we've got the Fajr clock and the adhan goes
Yes.
off. Once that adhan for Maghrib hits, then they are not allowed to eat anything.
Excellent rule.
So subhanallah, my daughter, she always runs to me, Baba, is it Maghrib yet? I'm like, can you still see the sun outside? She goes, yes. I go, well, you can still eat. Now, alhamdulillah, they've learned when Maghrib is, and they know, they've subhanallah, she was crying the other day because, oh no, she just heard the adhan and she knows I'm not going to allow her to eat after Maghrib. But if they're really annoying, maybe I'll give them like a glass of water or a glass of milk or something like
Now,
that.
is it suitable for the parents maybe to leave healthy alternatives around?
Absolutely. So, it's what's easy for them. Opening up the cupboard and seeing a packet of chips is easy. Opening up the fridge, opening up a drawer, looking at the fruits, getting it out, going and washing it, chewing through the skin of the apple, let's say, for example, and then finishing the apple, then it has to go back to the bin. That's a struggle for them. But if it's laid out on the bench, maybe if they had a bowl, bananas, something very simple, you peel it, you eat it, just right, whatever's right in front of them, they probably would go for first. So if you can have like a bowl of fruit out there, that's probably something that the children will go for.
Especially with the children at home now because of the homeschooling. Now, just another side question. How many of the injuries do you deal with have to do with obesity, with either the younger children or adults?
SubhanAllah, a lot of children and their posture-related type injuries are very prevalent. They're very common. Let's say a lower back, even shoulder injuries from poor posture. Neck injuries, a lot of neck injuries and headaches. You find kids complaining of headaches. They go get their eyes checked. They go get their iron levels checked and whatnot. Sometimes, a lot of the causes, actually a large percentage of headaches in people occur because of their neck. So we call them a cervicogenic headache. Your C2 and your C3, they innervated. They're nerves that come from your neck. They innervate the skin of the head and the face, and a lot of people that do get headaches, most of the time it's actually neck related, and it's due to bad posture. I've seen a lot of kids, they're growing pains. The doctor just sort of puts this umbrella term because he can't find anything on the x-ray and the ultrasound didn't show anything, and khalas, we'll just call it growing pains. A lot of the times it's actually, sciatic nerve pain, and this is unheard of in children. Generally, it's always been unheard of,
Because of weight?
since when? Yeah, generally from weight, from poor posture when they're sitting, prolonged sitting, a lot of twisting when they're sitting, especially. It's quite common now. I see a lot of children with like headaches or even shoulder problems, bursitis, because their shoulders are rounded and they're rolled forward because of their bad posture, or their lower back hurts, or they're getting leg pains from their lower backs, or even their knees sort of knock in, they roll in because they're overweight, and their hips have to adjust to the weight, and sort of their hips roll in, and their knees get damaged over time. SubhanAllah. Not only that, in that a lot of children are being subjected to high-intensity type activities on a daily basis. SubhanAllah, some parents want their kids to be a Ronaldo overnight and want to train them every day with poor nutrition, poor sleep. Resting is very minimal. They don't really sleep well. They don't sleep much. They don't give them a day break. So that kind of repetitive strain catches up with the child when they're in their teenage years, and they realize, wow, these kids have got long life injuries of degeneration in their joints that we could have prevented when they were young, but we didn't really realize. Like especially the repetitive type sports like tennis, they've got to spend 1 hour just swinging and rotating at this ball. Imagine what their shoulders going through, what their spine is going through. Similarly, other sports like netball, they have this very silly rule that you have to catch and pivot. You don't have to pivot, but generally most people catch and pivot on the one leg. Most ACL injuries occur and medial meniscus injuries occur because of loading, weight bearing, and pivoting and twisting. So, the Prophet ﷺ told us, we are a medium nation. Don't go to extremes in one way or in the other. So don't be so active that you're injuring yourself, and don't be so inactive that you're also injuring yourself.
Yeah. We have a question here, Abu Umair. Question: fishing has been allowed by the government as passive exercise. What do you advise?
Well, if you're a professional fisherman and you're catching a fish every 5 minutes, then yeah, that's passive exercise. Passive exercise. I don't even know if that's a word or a phrase. Yeah. But Wallah, if you're going to go there with your packet of chips and shapes and your Coke in the middle of the night, come in.
99% of people do.
Yeah, when you should be resting. And you're smashing down all these high in sugar, high in fat type snacks, and you're very inactive. Besides throwing your rod in and maybe even getting a rotator cuff injury in your shoulder, then it's highly unrecommended.
We've discussed the kids generally, the sisters at home generally. What about now the men, the brothers? What do we advise them to keep active at home during these times?
Well, the brothers, the advice is very similar to the ladies. In that if you do have an office job, whether it be a lady or a man, and you're working from home, and you do have an office, a workstation at home, try and improve on your workstation. Try and look up on Google and find, what's ergonomically correct, and correct your workstation. Have a timer there to try and keep active and get up every 5 to 10 minutes. In your lunch break, utilize your lunch break. Maybe instead of having a 1 hour lunch break, you can break it up into 15-minute breaks. So you'd work for an hour and a half, and then you go for a walk for 15 minutes, and do that every hour and a half, as well as utilizing your phone conversations. So I get a lot of psychologists. They complain of lower back injuries and neck injuries because they're sitting down all day, either Zooming their consultations or listening to patients and whatnot. SubhanAllah, so I've advised...
Zooming, you mean video conference?
Yeah, video conferencing, yep. Yeah. So I've advised them that if it's a long-standing patient, if it's a patient that and not much notes need to be recorded, then utilize walking around whilst you're talking to them. Go out, actually walk up and down the street, obviously keeping their identity confidential and their data confidential, their records confidential, afwan. But walking around and taking phone conversations, or maybe scheduling your phone calls around your breaks. Like, have a break, but that break is a phone conversation that you'd have. So let's say I've scheduled with Nadal at 10:30 after an hour and a half of doing some work. 10:30, I've got a 15-minute meeting, phone conversation with Nadal. I would literally call you. I would walk outside and I would walk up and down the street, or walk in my backyard, or keep active at that time.
That's what I do.
So utilize that time. A lot of people obviously spend their time on phones, and whether it be, and even if video conferencing, you can walk outside and video. You can use your phone now for video conferencing. Keeping active literally as much as possible. Where when you don't need the computer, let's advise you to be walking, or going up and down steps. Or if you're watching a video for education purposes or whatever it may be, watch it whilst you're doing something active, if you can. SubhanAllah, it is so important to remain active. That when we were studying fi ulum al-Quran, we were studying the amthal of the scholars, and there was a book on the amthal, and the scholar, I remember, they would ask him,
what's the amthal?
Amthal, parables,
parables?
Arabic parables. And one of the scholars said that there is a verse in the Quran for every Arabic parable that you can come up with. And so they would smash him with a parable, and he would come up with a verse, and a parable, and he'd come up with a verse. And then they said to him, and this is the one I remembered because being a physio, you remember these
yes.
Ones that are related to you. They said, Fil harakati al barakat. in movement there is blessing, right? And they said, what is your verse for this? And he said, the verse, I think it's in Surah Al-Tawbah. ومن يهاجر في أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم ومن يهاجر في سبيل الله يجد في الأرض مراغما كثيرا وسعة. Whoever disperses through the lands and travels through the lands, he would experience the land being vast and blessings in the earth. So it brings me to another story. SubhanAllah, I used to work with a radiologist, and I said to him, doctor, I'm not going to mention his name for privacy reasons. I said, I think you've got maybe one of the best jobs I've ever come across. You sit down all day, and you earn quite a lot of money just from looking at a screen, looking at X-rays and looking at MRIs and ultrasounds and whatnot. He said, "Don't be fooled, Naz. Don't be fooled." and this guy, to give you a little bit of a hint, this guy lives in Bondi.
Yes.
He said to me, "Don't be fooled, Naz."
It's not a good area to live in at the moment. But anyway, it's another story.
We know the majority of the people that live in Bondi. He said, "Don't be fooled. I've got high levels of cholesterol because I'm sitting down all day.
Ya Allah.
I've got back pain and neck pain because I literally am just stiff and stuck to one position. I'm on the verge of diabetes, and my glasses are getting thicker every year."
Size, yeah.
So he said, "So don't be fooled.
Yeah.
I'd rather be in your position whereby you're active,
yeah.
You're walking between patients and whatnot, than to have all this money that cannot cure a metabolic disorder." And so he would walk to the train station, catch a train from Bondi all the way to Campbelltown at the time, and then he would literally, even though he's so wealthy, he could have a taxi service or an Uber these days, or have a chauffeur for him. But he decided to be active,
very important.
as much as possible. Yeah. So, as much as you think that your work is important, once that disc disease comes on, or that metabolic disease such as diabetes comes on, or you develop atherosclerosis, which is fat lining of the arteries and hardening of the arteries, and your blood pressure starts to increase, and you need to be popping pill after pill every day to maintain whatever health you've got. No money in the world can bring back your health after that. And the only thing that can actually possibly improve on these kind of conditions is exercise.
Reminds us of the hadith that the Prophet ﷺ said there are two blessings which people take for granted and fast lose out, and that is free time and good health. The greatest blessings you can have, subhanallah.
I think it was Ibn Umar, he said, خذ من صحتك قبل مرضك ومن حياتك قبل موتك. And he said other things. وكان ابن عمر يقول إذا أصبحت فلا تنتظر المساء, I think, وإذا أمسيت فلا تنتظر الصباح وخذ من صحتك لمرضك وخذ من حياتك لموتك. And they had some, subhanallah, very wise words that they used to say. So he used to say, if you've awoken, don't wait for the evening, because you might not reach the evening and you don't know when death arrives. And if you are going into the evening, don't wait for the morning, because you don't know if actually you're going to wake up. And take from your health before sickness, and take from your life before death approaches.
And there's the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ as well, take care of 5 before 5, and one of them is good health until you get sick, and youth before you get old. Moving on, we've discussed children generally, we've discussed mothers, pregnant sisters we forgot to touch upon.
Depending on the stage of pregnancy, so we would always recommend women, subhanAllah, when they're pregnant, they just want to relax, and obviously it's a difficult time for them. There's increasing weight, and hormones are starting to play up and whatnot. So I would always recommend for the pregnant women some kind of low intensity, low impact type activities, such as walking. I wouldn't recommend, obviously, definitely in the late stages of pregnancy, any kind of high impact type activities like sprinting or high jumps, or not high jumps, star jumps,
yes,
or those kind of activities. They some doctors and some of the research states that it's okay within the first 3 months, early phase, and generally within the middle phase. But as you get to the late, with the increase in weight, it's actually quite, probably not the best for your spinal health and for your physical joints to be tolerating that kind of weight. But generally, walking is probably the safest. And, gestational diabetes is very common nowadays. Women, mashallah, they just keep eating, and they pack on the way because they think they need to eat for two. Very little do they know that they only need such a small amount of food extra just to feed that fetus of theirs. So, remaining active again, and just generally walking, and just keeping a healthy diet. Literally for everyone that we've discussed today, it's the healthy diet. We have two systems in our body. We have a parasympathetic system which looks after your digestion and sleeping and resting, and we have a sympathetic system which looks after either fainting or when you're highly active. So when you eat a heavy meal, your body's blood rushes to the digestive system, and it tries to work the digestive system so that it can get metabolize the food, and so your blood in your muscular system is then reduced. Right, and this is why people, when they eat and they exercise, they feel like throwing up afterwards.
Okay.
Why? Because the body's fighting. So the blood's in the gut, but then we need the body in the muscular system. So if the blood comes out of the muscular out of the gut into the muscular system, the stomach can't metabolize that food, so the stomach wants to get rid of it. Generally, that's how it works. So if you've had a heavy meal, then the body just wants to go into rest and digest. That's the phrase for the parasympathetic system. So when you have a heavy meal, the body wants to go into rest and digest, and he wants to just sleep and relax. So how active or how active would you feel, or how productive can you feel after having a heavy meal? Let's say you have it for lunch. That's why they call it the 3 o'clock itis, whatever it is, because you've eaten so much at lunch. By the time it hits 3 o'clock and your body's trying to digest it, you're flatlined. SubhanAllah, but when you find that you're fasting and you skip that lunch meal after you've gotten over that sort of hunger curb at lunchtime, you find that you've got more energy and you're more active, and you can actually do more until it hits just before iftar and you're thinking about food. So small meals throughout the day, keeping active, whether it be for the pregnant women or generally anybody. That's probably the best advice that we can give you now to keep fit and active and healthy.
We have another question here from Sister Nuha. What can an elderly person do to stay active? Thanks.
With the elderly, subhanAllah, it depends on if we're looking at 60s, 70s. We can't talk numbers now because people get upset. Elderly generally for me would be considered 70 plus. Generally they're at high risk of at some risk of falls and whatnot, so you need to get them in an environment that is suitable and safe for them. So if they can walk, let's say on a concrete type park, pathway, whatever it may be, generally not on grass. I do recommend it if they're healthy and they're active. Grass is good because it allows them to improve on their balance, but if they've got balance issues, then just general walking up and down on a concrete pathway that's obviously that doesn't have any trip hazards, or on a bike or a cross trainer at home, or there's really some good YouTube videos, and this be for everyone as well as the elderly. Some YouTube videos of like 30-minute workouts at home that they can perform, whether it be for the children as well at their lunch break. They can follow one type of video every day, a different video. But there's so many videos out there that you can type up elderly home exercise program, 30-minute, and then you'll find so many videos on YouTube that they can actually just follow. And even the Wii, if they're really up for it, they can use the Wii to play maybe tennis or bowling or some kind of game that requires them to be active.
Okay, we're heading to the home stretch, as we say. Jazakallah khair. How about a workout at home? Maybe you can give us a sample workout, maybe for those who have a bit of equipment and those who have no equipment. Just a brief one.
So there's a few principles that you need to follow when you're working out at home. So you can't wake up in the morning, pop your running clothes on, and just start sprinting out in the middle of the in the street down to the park and whatnot. Your body needs to warm up, especially in the morning. Your joints really need to warm up. Your muscles need to warm up. And most importantly, your tendons and your ligaments really need to warm up. And so this is considered the warm-up phase of the exercise program, or part of your exercise regime. So generally a warm-up should be low load, so low impact, so you're not really jumping or anything like that. Low intensity, something that doesn't really speed up your heart rate, but just sufficient to sort of get the blood pumping. So we generally would recommend like a walk, generally like a kilometer or 2 kilometer walk. For some people, that's an exercise program in itself. But for a healthy and active adult, I'd recommend maybe a 1 to 2K walk around the park, just enough that you start to feel that your respiratory rate is increased. You're starting to feel that you're sort of beginning to sweat. If you've got equipment at home, that could be on a bike. You don't have to go all out hard on a bike or even a cross trainer. Start off lightly and sort of build the intensity up. So generally you feel that your respiratory rate is starting to increase. You feel a little bit sweaty. You feel that your joints are more fluid, that you're sort of, you're a little bit more active. You can tolerate a little bit more intensity. And we usually aim for a warm-up to be 10 to 20 minutes, especially the brothers that used to go to the gym. SubhanAllah, I'd see them. They would go in and they would walk straight into the weight section.
Heavy weights,
and they just start pumping these weights. And I'm like, yep, I'll see you one day for treatment. So generally, that's the warm-up. The second part of an exercise regime should encompass some type of activity around cardiovascular fitness. So that's pretty much all cardiorespiratory fitness. Something whereby your heart rate is pumping, all your blood vessels are working really well and high and pushing out the blood, and your lungs are really starting to be stretched out in terms of taking in air. And that's really important, especially for the middle to later age, whereby the base of your lungs, they're really quite important to try and get air down into there. Most people that have lung disorders, it's the base of their lungs that tend to collapse, builds up the mucus, builds up bacteria, and starts to develop infection in the base of the lungs. So one of the treatments that we perform is just giving basic deep breathing type exercises, diaphragmatic breathing, that allows the bottom section of the lungs to get that air. And as that air goes through the lungs, it picks up the mucus and it starts to expel that through the airways and out of the lungs. And generally, essentially, that's probably one of the best ways to keep your lungs healthy and reduce the risk of infection, especially as you get to your middle and higher end of your life. So from the warm-up to follow up, you can increase your intensity on the bike or the cross trainer or the treadmill or the walk, develop that into a jog and develop that into a run. And you can aim to sort of have some sprints in there. So something that's very followed today is high-intensity training. And SubhanAllah, I used to follow high-intensity training back at university more than 15 years ago when the research started to come out. And so what high-intensity training is that you keep your heart rate at a moderate level, and like let's say, for example, a jog. And then when you're able to, you perform a sprint until you sort of go to fatigue or almost just as fatigue. So you spike your heart rate, you spike your respiratory rate, everything goes up, your metabolic rate goes up, and then you slow down again, and then you go down to a moderate level, and then you do that every so often, as often as you can, as your body can tolerate. So they've found that to be more effective. Even recent research has shown that if you just spiked your heart rate up let's say every hour, that's better than possibly doing, let's say, a 30-minute exercise program of basic moderate cardiovascular intensity type activities. So the aim of cardiovascular type exercises is to keep your heart rate between 75 and 85% of your maximum. So for a healthy adult, that's like we calculated as 220 minus your age. So for a 20-year-old, the heart rate should be at 170, roughly. That's sort of 85% of maximum. If it's above 170, then you're looking at probably getting a heart attack, having a heart attack or something. So you want to sort of try and restrict your heart rate to maximum about the 170. If you're a 20-year-old, then obviously it gets lower and lower as you get older. So the calculation is 220 minus your age, and then you times it by 85%, and that should give you your not your maximum, but the level of intensity that you should maintain whilst you're exercising. And generally that should be maintained for about, let's say, if you can bounce up and down from that for about 20 to 30 minutes, then that's an exercise workout on its own if you can. So you can do running. I've got sprinting. You can do running up and down steps. You can do other things like squatting and lunges and skipping. Even for the ladies at home, skipping is really good for the upper body and for the lower body. Obviously, after you're warm, it works your legs, it works your spine, it works your spinal muscles, obviously, posture muscles. It's a good cardiovascular exercise workout. It's actually quite a good exercise. I wouldn't consider it low intensity, but it's quite low because you're not really jumping so high when you're skipping. It's just the low kicks. The third part of a workout should incorporate, especially for the older generation, some kind of strength or resistance type training. We've found as you get older, your muscles weaken, and it's not because your muscles degenerate. No, it's because they physically become less active, or they don't require to do as much resistance work as they used to do when they were young. So your muscles, your muscles are the last thing to die off, unless you've got a muscular dystrophy. Your muscles, if you're 90 or if you're 19, you train them, they will develop strength. So it's just a matter of keeping them conditioned. Resistance nowadays, people have been using bands. You can use your body weight, like simple things like, like I said, squats, lunges or walking lunges, going up a step and down, single leg squat, a single leg bridge, single leg deadlift. They're simple exercises for the legs that if you do like 20 reps, your muscles will fatigue anyway. It's just maybe, unless you're super fit, super athlete, you can do that. But for the average Joe, doing that once every second day for the lower body, and trying breaking up lower body and upper body. So give your lower body like two days to rest, and then you can do your upper body like using the bands, or using your bottles that are about 1 kilo or 2 kilos in plastic bags for like bicep curls and shoulder presses and lateral raises. Obviously doing them with correct posture. You can do push-ups. You can do on your tummy. Lifting for your upper back. You can lift up the bottles of weights. It's quite hard to do it without weight, just keeping your arms there for about 10-15 seconds. There's so many exercises that you can do. All you have to do is just Google body weight exercises, upper body weight exercises, lower body weight exercises, and you'll find a range of activities that you can do. And generally you want to aim for at least 20 reps, with these body type weight exercises, about 20 repetitions, and then change it up.
Should you rest in between?
Generally, the rest is just enough for you to catch your breath. That's how it should be. So that cardio exercise that you're working out should maintain through to the resistance type activities that you're performing. And so you can try and break it up. So you can do push-ups, and then you can do with a band sort of standing row or something. You can do biceps, and then you can do triceps. So you're always sort of changing up so that you're not using the same muscles, you're not using the same joints, so as to avoid any kind of repetitive strain. You should also incorporate, especially for people that have office-type jobs, incorporate some flexibility type exercises, especially for the neck and the lower back. And you can look online for some basic flexibility exercises. But generally for the neck, like tilting to the side and pushing it down and bringing the ear to your shoulder, rotating once on either side, looking up and down, especially looking up and down. A lot of people, because of that fixed posture that they develop over years, their ability to look up is actually quite restricted, and they don't realize that they're only looking up by nodding up, but they actually can't look up with their whole neck because they've developed that stiffness. So just maintaining the basic movements: forward, backwards, left, right, side tilt, and side tilt. If you do that every 5 minutes, it alleviates any kind of stiffness that you may develop. A lot of people, they want to crack their necks at work. They want to, do these ones and all sorts, thinking that it feels so good. And it's only feeling good because it's alleviating some of that stiffness. But if you practice a stretching type activity every 5 to 10 minutes, you actually will alleviate that need in the long term, alleviate that need to want to feel to crack the neck. And subhanAllah, I've worked with so many patients that, they were what's the word? They were like serial crackers. They want to crack every 5-10 minutes, and it feels so good. But subhanAllah, I switched it over to a basic stretching program. And subhanAllah, that stretching program, they were able to stretch out to half an hour to 1 hour. And it's just alleviated that need for them to want to feel that they need to crack.
Now, you've mentioned warming up. You've mentioned a few stages of a workout. What about warming down? Is that important?
So warming down is important. You don't want to just go from high intensity and all of a sudden just stop and then sit on your couch and do nothing. Like a cool down should consist of, as we said, maybe flexibility, like going into the flexibility type activities. But you can actually do that whilst you're cooling down, maybe like a walk, just a basic walk around, or just the slow pace on the bike or the cross trainer or something, just to sort of slow you down and sort of bring your heart rhythm back down into
Excellent. We have another question, good question from Sister Omar. She says, what are some early signs to look for to be able to correct any physical problems before they get worse? For example, back and neck posture.
Generally, the early signs is stiffness, the feeling of stiffness, the feeling of pain. A lot of people, especially in their teenage years, and especially even in earlier, they don't actually have a sense of pain. Their sense of pain, you'll find out if you have kids, this, that the pain has to reach such a threshold before they tell the parents. This is unbearable. They're screaming and crying, because they're I don't know why, but their sensation of or their perception of pain, they have this high threshold. And so, I always tell my kids, if you feel stiffness, if you feel any kind of pain, you need to let me know, so that I can sort of assess you and see if there is some kind of issue that's developing. So stiffness in a joint, or stiffness in a particular movement, or restriction in mobility of any joint or any movement, or any activity. So let's say people squatting down, if they can't squat down, why can't they squat down? Is it restriction in their ankle or in their knees or in their hips or in their lower back? That's a sign of some kind of issue that's probably going to progress. So stiffness, restriction, pain, and generally weakness. So people, they don't know they have a problem, but they just think that it's weakness. Sometimes like walking down a step. They think, oh, my knee, it's so weak. I can't walk down the step. But in fact, it's probably not weak. It's probably that they have a physical problem in the knee, and they've had it for so long that their muscles have weakened over time, and they sort of put it down to weakness. So I'll mention that again. Restricted movement, stiffness or a feeling of stiffness, a feeling of pain coming out of the muscles or out of the joints, or weakness in a certain area or a certain physical activity.
Now, since you mentioned the cracking of the neck, I remember growing up, they used to tell us if you intertwine your fingers too much, you're going to get arthritis when you get older. Is that a truth or myth?
So obviously there's differing opinions here. If you ask a chiro, they'll say no. There's different joints in the body. There's different synovial joints. This joint is, the knuckle joints are quite different, for example, to your spinal joints. So when you manipulate a joint, the theory behind the cracking of the manipulation is the release of carbon dioxide into the joint because of the quick change in volume and pressure, and so carbon dioxide comes out of the synovial fluid, which comes into the depressurized area, and then when the joint goes back into its normal position, it cracks. And there's a theory behind it. They're not 100% sure. In the spinal joints, it's not one of my recommendations to manipulate straight away. So in the field of physiotherapy, we go through grades of mobilizations. So we will mobilize the spine or the joints in a particular way to try and improve certain movements. So if you can't bend, then we would manipulate, or not manipulate, don't use that word, we would mobilize the spine through grade 1, grade 2, grade 3, grade 4 to try and assist that patient in bending. And then when we reach the grade 5, which is a manipulation, it's a high thrust mobilization, that's when we would manipulate. But generally, by the time you reach grade 3, grade 4, the patient's achieved full range of movement. The manipulation in the spinal joint is quite different to the other joints, because when you're doing good to one side, you're actually probably damaging the other side. So when you open up one joint in the spine, you're actually closing one joint, and it's a high velocity thrust, which means that there's going to be compaction or impact between the two joint surfaces on the opposite side. And if you're doing that regularly, in my opinion, I feel that you will damage the joint surfaces, and over time this may lead to degeneration in the joint, and which could possibly lead to arthritis. But that's my opinion. Other people would differ. So
2 more questions and we'll finish, inshallah. 1, gaming. Kids sitting on games for many hours. How should they sit? We don't want them to sit for many hours, but how should they sit when they're playing a game which is not active like the Wii, when they're standing up and doing all the movements like the tennis and the bowling, but they're actually sitting down? How dangerous is that? And also the thumb injuries that we're seeing today, the hand injuries, or the bad thumb from smartphones. So how should they and how can they avoid injury and harming themselves long term regarding this? I'll address
the game console one first. SubhanAllah, this has been a karitha. This has been a disaster to our
100%.
And SubhanAllah, my son the other day, he came back and he's like, Baba, all my friends at school play Fortnite. I'm like, oh man, I wasn't hoping that he'd find out. I was hoping that he wouldn't find out about this for a long time. But SubhanAllah, in year 1, we don't have any other game console except the Wii, because that's probably the best one that keeps them active. But if your child does have an Xbox or a PlayStation, the recommendation that I would generally provide to my patients is that they get a beanbag. Now, I've been a fan of beanbags. A beanbag will allow, and it has to be a high beanbag, not a low one. And so, one of those cone type beanbags that can actually support the head, the middle back, the lower back, and even the pelvis and the hips. You can adjust the beanbag so that the child is sitting back into the beanbag, and so that he's sort of in a way offloading to an extent his spine. His head is supported. His spine is completely supported. You can push out the beanbag so that you can get some kind of lumbar support happening in the lower back, and then they could be completely supported, and then they can play their game. If that's not an option, generally, if they're going to be sitting on the couch, I would recommend that they sit back and rest their head back on the actual cushions. Generally, you want to offload your spine. You want to be able to have enough support for your spine, literally from head all the way down to their pelvis.
And smartphones, even probably worse today.
So the smartphones come in. That's a big problem, and they're developing neck problems. They're developing early onsets of arthritis. SubhanAllah, I've seen children late, around the 10 years of age, going into their early teens, coming to me with scans that have shown that they've got arthritis. This was something that you wouldn't see back in the days. It's only something that's recent. So in regards to the phone, you need to bring the phone up. You need to constantly stick your chest out so that you've got your posture upright. And you need to try and really avoid the tapping onto the phone, especially with your thumbs. So the way I utilize my phone is I've got a smartphone. I haven't got an iPhone because it's just not smart enough for me. So I do use a smartphone.
So you're an Android?
An Android, yes. Alhamdulillah. And it's the smart way. I've been using for the last maybe the Note. I usually use the Note. So the last maybe 2 generations, I swipe across. So when I want to type, I don't actually physically have to type. I will just swipe across the letters, and generally it predicts a word for me, and most of the 99% of the time it's the correct word. And that's sufficient for me to avoid any kind of repetitive strain injury on my thumb. So that's what I would recommend, to try and really avoid that heavily tapping. And generally it comes from games. They have to, if it's a shooting game or game that requires them to repetitively use their thumbs, they really need to try and avoid those kind of games, to be honest with you, especially on the phones, because every force has an equal and opposite reaction. I can't remember Newton's law. Every action has an equal and opposite reaction. So if you're pressing down onto that hard screen, that force is just going to come back through your joints, and then over time that repetitive activity of your thumb is going to start to damage and degenerate the actual the joint surfaces of your thumb.
Jazakallah khair. And the last question, and the most important question of the night, you are also a Quran teacher, Jazakallah khair, and that's the best jobs, or the best job, as the Prophet ﷺ said, the best of you are those who teach the Quran and teach others, or learn the Quran and teach others, afwan. And we ask Allah to make us from those people.
May Allah accept from us, inshallah.
I mean, what is some advice you could give to the parents at home for a Quran program with their children who are at home now more than ever?
Yes. So what I come across is a lot of parents trying to teach their kids Quran, yet they themselves weren't taught by a properly learned person in the Quran or in Quran recitation. So generally what we do for our kids is Minshawi. He's my favorite. Alhamdulillah, yes. They've got so many YouTube videos of Minshawi. Rahmatullahi alayh. They have a children's Minshawi learning mushaf on YouTube, and I know I'm not a fan of YouTube, but it's really beneficial. So they've high pitched his voice, so he would recite Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, and then a high pitched children's like Mickey Mouse type voice would repeat after him. And subhanAllah, you'd find some of them, the surah, they've repeated it for like 10 times. And so the child would hear Minshawi recite it, and then they would recite it with the children.
So repetition.
Yeah. So pretty much it's repetition. Most of our children, alhamdulillah, their mother tongue now has become English. And so the only way to truly teach them the correct way of reciting is for them to hear the correct way of reciting and only know the correct way of reciting, so that there's no There's no, they're not being affected by a wrong recitation. They only know one way. Khalas, this is the way you read it, this is the way they read it, and this is the way they start to memorize it. And so, alhamdulillah, I don't think there's, Minshawi is of the top reciters in terms of his tajweed. So, if you can utilize something like that, let's say half an hour in the morning and half an hour in the evening of the same surah, then I believe that's sufficient for them to learn a few verses every day. And if you can keep that up, let's say every day or 5 days or 6 days a week, then you'd find that they'd start to get accustomed to learning that way. So reading off the mushaf as well as listening, as well as reading with the sheikh in the right way. And then you'd find that they themselves will start to be reading with correct tajweed without them having to think about implementing the tajweed rules whilst they're reciting.
Because they're just copying the sheikh.
Because they're just copying. That's the only way they know how to read.
That's it. Yeah.
That's the only way they know how to read. Yeah.
What about in terms of revising what they've memorized?
So obviously, what I would recommend is they obviously sit in front of the mushaf and have a wird, a daily revision program. So if they can revise, let's say 2 pages a day. So if they're quick readers, they should get a page out within 2 to 3 minutes. If they've memorized it properly. If they haven't, then it might take them 4 to 5 minutes to read a page. And so if they can do 2 pages, which is 10 minutes a day, then that'll be sufficient for them. And if they've memorized Juz' Amma, they might, if it's 2 pages, it might take them 10 days to revise Juz' Amma, for example.
Because many of the schools give them, if they go to Islamic schools, they give them just a bit. They don't give them too much. And for some kids, that may be sufficient. For other kids, where they're studying the Quran on a more regular level, the parents should stick to that program you just gave them, inshallah.
If they're not advanced and if their reading skills aren't the best as well, what you can do is you can just revise with the Minshawi program that I showed you, that I was describing before. Even just going through it once. Once the brain starts to develop that memory, and even till today, they don't know how the memory works in the brain, subhanAllah. They don't know how, a bunch of molecules and ions and just moving across barriers and whatnot, how that maintains so much memory. So once that neural pathway is set, it just needs to be activated so often for them to keep that in their memory. So if they've memorized it, listening to it once a week, that one surah is probably sufficient for them to keep that in their memory.
Inshallah, I'll get the link off you, and we'll post it on the link for this live broadcast, inshallah, on our Facebook page.
Inshallah.
Also, if any of the brothers and sisters have a question for Ustaz Nazir regarding what he discussed tonight, you can send us the question on our Facebook page, Albayan Radio, and inshallah we will try our best to get it answered for you as soon as possible. I thank Ustaz Nazir, Sheikh Nasir, for being with us tonight. It was quite beneficial. And I thank all the brothers and sisters for tuning in. Don't forget to get your Wi-Fi radio if you have already got one. If you haven't already got one, from Dar es Salaam Islamic Bookstore in Lakemba, and also from Bukhari House Islamic Bookstore in Auburn, or you can download our app on the Apple Store and also the Google App Store. Barakallahu feekum, and until next time, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Albayan Radio, the voice of Ahl Sunnati wal Jama'ah.